In this module, you will get a brief introduction to current copyright law in Canada and consider the implication of these laws for teachers. Before we look at the Canadian Copyright Act in some detail, take a look at the questions on the screen and try to determine whether each of the activities is legal or not in Canada. Post your responses with a reason for each decision on the online forum for this week, and we will discuss these further during your tutorial session. The Canadian Copyright Act applies to a variety of original works. Literary or textual works, books, pamphlets, poems, computer programs. Dramatic works, films, videos, plays, screenplays and scripts. Musical works, compositions consisting of both words and music or music only. Lyrics without music are considered literary works. Artistic works, paintings, drawings, maps, photographs, and sculptures. Architectural works, performances, broadcast communications, and sound recordings. You can access the Canadian Copyright Act at the link provided on the screen. All teachers need to be familiar with the contents of the Act. In Canada, your original work is copyrighted the instant you create it, with or without official copyright status. That means that even if you don't add the copyright symbol or make a note on your website that the material is protected under copyright, an individual cannot copy your work or repost it or redistribute it in any other way without your consent. Issues around copyright have become much more complex with the advent of the internet. After all, we seem to live in a copy-paste culture. Technology makes it so easy to reproduce content. There are a couple of points that help reduce the confusion around copyright in Canada. It's important to note that Canadian copyright protects intellectual property rather than physical property. The text of a novel or a song, rather than the actual book or paper it's printed on, and copyright entitlement legally ends at a certain point. Generally, it endures for the lifetime of the creator, the remainder of the calendar year in which the creator dies, and for 50 years after end of that calendar year. Before we go any further, consider what the implications of copyright laws have for teachers. In Canada, under a fair dealing provision, there are some exceptions that allow certain people to use original works without breaking copyright. Fair dealing, as defined by the Copyright Act, is more restrictive than fair use provisions in the United States, particularly in regards to education and teaching. In the United States, showing films or videos in a classroom without special permission or performance rights is permitted, as is making multiple copies of a poem, for example, and giving copies to each student. In Canada, public performance rights must be acquired to show a video or film in a classroom, and multiple copies cannot be made unless the work resides in the public domain. That is, the author has not been living for more than 50 years. In Canada, however, an educational institution or elementary and secondary school system can purchase and access copyright license. That provides permission to educational institutions to make photocopies of printed materials. These restrictions on copyright have significant implications for teachers who need to access material for their classes. Let's take a closer look at exactly what teachers in Canada are permitted to do. Under the Canada Copyright Act, teachers may do any one of the following so long as they are done so for the purposes of education or training and are done so on the school premises. To make a manual reproduction of a work onto a dry erase board, flip chart, or other similar surface intended for displaying handwritten material. To make a copy of a work for the purpose of projection using an overhead projector or a similar device such as an LCD, overhead, opaque, or slide projector, provided the work is used for the purpose of education and training and is not already available in a commercial format. To reproduce, translate, or perform in public on the premise of a work or other subject matter as required for a test or examination, not applicable if the work is commercially available in another medium appropriate for the purpose. To communicate by telecommunication a work or other subject matter as required for a test or examination, not applicable if the work is commercially available in another medium appropriate for the purpose. To perform a work required for a test or examination in public by a group consisting primarily of students on the premises, the audience must consist primarily of students, teachers, or other people directly responsible for setting the curriculum. To play a sound recording of a work required for a test or examination, the audience must consist primarily of students, teachers, or other people directly responsible for setting the curriculum. To play a broadcast required for a test or examination at the time of its communication to the public, the audience must consist primarily of students, teachers, or other people directly responsible for setting the curriculum. To make a single copy of a news program or news commentary program, excluding documentaries, for the purpose of playing the copy for students, the institution, however, must either destroy the copy or pay the applicable royalties within a year of making the copy. To make a single copy of a non-news program, to decide whether to perform the copy for educational or training purposes, recording can only be kept for 30 days before royalties are payable. Records must be kept. To play a copy of a news or non-news program must be played for education or training purposes on the premises to an audience consisting primarily of students. If the institution pays royalties, records must be kept. To copy and perform extracts from a work protected by copyright, unless the part of that work is deemed highly significant and/or valuable, courts make the final determination. To copy or perform works whose authors died more than 50 years ago, though the use of translations or annotations of such work is not permitted. To copy the text of federal and Ontario statutes, regulations, and court decisions without permission. To copy and perform extracts from a work protected by copyright unless the part is considered highly significant or valuable, the courts would make the final determination. The Council of Ministers of Education, Canada published a very handy guide for teachers called Copyright Matters, Canada, Some Key Questions and Answers for the Teacher. That is available for download at the site on the screen. If an educational institution purchases an access copyright license, teachers are permitted to make hard copies of excerpts up to 10% of books, journals, magazines, and newspapers for the use in their classroom. In some cases, the 10% rule may be exceeded if an entire chapter of a book comprises 20% or less of a book, an entire article or page from a newspaper, magazine, or journal, an entire short story, play, essay, or poem from a book, periodical, or anthology, an entire entry from a reference work, an entire reproduction of an artistic work from a publication, large print material to accommodate the perceptually disabled, published in Canada, in some cases, as specified in the license, out-of-print books. For more information, you can visit the Access Copyright site shown on the screen. Canada has been trying to reform its copyright laws in order to modernize the Copyright Act so that it more accurately reflects the digital age. By the time you take this course, the Act will probably have been changed. Read the CBC article on the link on the screen and be prepared to discuss both online and in your weekly tutorial session the implication of these changes for Canadians in general and for teachers in particular. Many teachers are taking advantage of the many affordances of digital technologies in their teaching. They are eager to tap into the out-of-school interests and literacies that their students are engaged in at home. They are asking their students to create digital texts and projects that include digital images, music, and other sounds, video clips, and animations. Students naturally gravitate towards using images they can access easily online. Of course, we now know that we need to educate our students about copyright laws and help them develop into good digital citizens. We can steer them towards sites that offer copyright-free content such as Creative Commons. The creators of Creative Commons are striving to provide a free, public, and standardized infrastructure that creates a balance between the reality of the internet and the reality of copyright laws. Go to the Creative Commons site and read about their mission and vision. Explore the site by searching for something that you might want to use with your future students. Sites such as Creative Commons call into question traditional notions about authorship and ownership. What are the implications for authors and creators of digital content who agree to share their work through Creative Commons? This question will be taken up this week in our online discussion.